My personal observation is when you have a really good engineer, the productivity and the outcome, it's not 2 or 3 times, it's 10 times higher.
This is DevOps Paradox, episode number 176. Critical skills that every engineer should master. Welcome to DevOps Paradox. This is a podcast about random stuff in which we, Darren and Victor, pretend we know what we're talking about. Most of the time, we mask our ignorance by putting the word DevOps everywhere we can and mix it with random buzzwords like Kubernetes, serverless, CI/CD, team productivity, islands of happiness, and other fancy expressions that make us sound like we know what we're doing. Occasionally, we invite guests who do know something, but we do not do that often since they might make us look incompetent. The truth is out there, and there is no way we are going to find it. P.S. It's Darren reading this text and feeling embarrassed that Victor made me do it. Here are your hosts, Darren Pope and Victor Farsick. Victor, along the way, people keep asking us, what do I need to know in order to become a DevOps engineer?
Oh, I know that. That's easy.
Is it?
Yeah.
There is no such thing as a DevOps engineer?
Since
Is that what it
DevOps
is?
is everything to everybody and nothing to nobody, then the answer is everything. Just learn everything. All major clouds, all tools that have a DevOps sticker, which is essentially 99% of the tools, because probably there is one that forgot to put a sticker. So it's everything. It's easy. And by the way, you learn all the programming languages as well.
So you're also saying this DevOps is nothing more than an extended Seinfeld episode.
Yes, a very long one.
And much more sad because it actually never ends. With that in mind, we have a guest on with us. We have Sashank on from BOS Framework. How are you doing, Sashank?
I'm good. I'm doing really well. How are you?
Good. Did I get your name right?
You got it right, yes.
I try, and I tend to mess up. Now, notice, as you're listening, I didn't attempt his last name. So, Sashank, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about BOS, and then let's get into, what are the skills that people need to develop in order to really become something in DevOps?
So, Darren, I am Sashank. I tell everybody that it's like the movie Shank Redemption without the W. So, Sashank. And I am the founder and CEO of BOS Framework. But what I really describe myself as is a engineer, loves to build things, but really fanatically focused on customer engagement, user experience, and business outcome. So I like to use engineering for that purpose. BOS is my third startup, so enjoy doing what I do a lot. And built BOS as an offshoot of my second company, which was a dev shop. Built it in Philly, have offices in Hyderabad, India, Sydney, Australia. We built about 200 products and found ourselves doing the same thing again and again and again. And we said, why don't we build an internal platform to bring some internal efficiencies? Why do we want to build the same stuff? Why do we want to provision the same type of infrastructure every single time? And we ended up over about 50 engagements perfecting iteratively what has ultimately become BOS Framework. And we started seeing fantastic results, and we floated it as a new company. And the past 4 years, we've actually grown substantially, over doubled every year.
So you were scratching your own itch. That's what caused this now BOS Framework third startup to come into play. I mean, what were the skills that you had to have or your team had to have in order to get from that ideation phase into what you have today? Because those were skills that you had to have in order to even get bootstrapped.
I think this is probably counterintuitive in certain ways, but the biggest skill we really needed was a lot of persistence and dogged stubbornness to just make it happen, because there was no playbook on how to build what we're building. Software engineering is a very directive field. It's not very prescriptive. It's basically what you decide it's going to have to be. So we started experimenting. We started building various technologies, and we ultimately had to build something that could be a very good combination of bringing standards of how somebody could build a consistent product, no matter what the technology, but an architectural framework that can guarantee results in an agnostic manner. So, a lot of engineering, understanding of frameworks like TOGAF, being able to extensively research various tools, look at how everything fits together ultimately, um, experimenting, iterating on it, and then making it open-ended to where it is malleable and highly navigable as technology evolves. I don't know if that's a good answer, but that's basically what comes to my mind.
What you called out at the beginning was one of the skills that everybody has to learn is to be persistent. You're not going to be able to be successful probably in any career of any type unless you are persistent. So that's a nice soft skill. Usually as engineers, we suck pretty hard at soft skills. Most of us do. I'm speaking for myself. Victor doesn't, and you don't, but I do. But what are a couple of other, again, critical skills that people really need to know? Obviously, communication, we'll put that in there. Usually that means actually talking to people, not just sending snarky Slack messages. Are there a couple of other ones? Let's talk sort of the soft skills first, and then we'll get into the hard skills in a minute.
Yeah, I think soft skills is probably a good word, but I've always called them human skills, power skills. These are extremely important. I call them human skills because ultimately what we're trying to do here is business. Business is people interacting with other people in the service of other people. So it's absolutely critical that engineers, if you want to be called an engineer, if you just want to be called a coder or a code integrator, that's different. You can afford not to have soft skills, power skills, human skills. But if you want to be an engineer, what you're doing is something that impacts human life. So one thing that I've always taught my team, and I've tried my best to practice myself, is understanding what people want, viewed engineering as something that impacts human life. It's a professional career that is absolutely critical, and I think native in the human DNA. We want to build, we want to maintain, we want to protect. All these are engineering elements, and they belong in the human DNA. And so I think that's a very important skill, understanding business, understanding people, understanding what people want, but are not able to say and express, what they need, but are not aware yet. So that's how I viewed engineering.
So with these human skills, let's assume that we've covered them all at this point. What are the, of course we haven't, what are the like real technical skills that an engineer needs today in order to succeed?
I've always viewed, and when I say technical skill, before I cover technical skills, because it's such a subjective question, Darren, we've got to be careful about, people, what tech stack, what domain, which part of the tech ecosystem, etc. But I want to probably just take a step back, talk about the approach. When you talk about impact of human life using engineering, it's about the approach. Invariably, the solution lies not in any technology, not in any single implementation, as much as the approach that you take to coming up with an ultimate solution. What does that approach look like given the outcome? So I look at technology choices as being relative to that outcome and in line and in the service of the approach that you take. Once you know what that approach is, then you think about what type of a product it is, where does it have to be hosted, where does it have to be served from? Is that for a business? Is that for a customer? Is that a B2B? Is that a B2C? What is the domain? What are the security requirements as a result? How do you persist data? How do you secure it? How do you store it? Security footprint, observability. So many things come into that. So I think we can start unpacking that. I guess we can start doing that at some point during this conversation. But the approach determines the various things that need to be done, which then determines the technology choices that we start making.
Is it argument can be made that for the reverse logic as well, right? So yes, the culture and attitude and this and that influences the technological choices you're going to make. But technology is also influencing how we think and how we approach things, right? There are certain technology choices that enable certain type of behavior or certain type of organization and vice versa, right? So I see it more cyclical than, kind of only one direction. Hey, if you're like this, then this is the technology you need. Very often technology enables behavior.
I think you make a very good point. I must agree with you. It's cyclical. I think human need has created technology, right? And technology then further creates human need or enables behavior, like you said. I think, like you correctly pointed out. So I think, I don't know what you think, Victor, but how about just distinguishing technologists from engineers and calling out their interdependence? An engineer is somebody that's able to impact human life. A technology is somebody that empowers him with the technology, the tools that are required for him to be able to engineer an impact. And these work together in many ways. And maybe it's the same person that's able to do both.
Maybe really experienced person is the same person.
A really experienced, a really good guy. And that's a unicorn, right? How many of them do we really have? Somebody that's so good with technology that also can impact human life. Those that are really good have become the richest people in the world.
Yeah. But on one hand, yes, we don't have many. But it's also questionable whether we don't have many because organizations do not tend to create them or because they do not exist. Right? I could argue that, yeah, we all finish university, or some of us finish universities, right? But most of what we are and how we behave and whether we are one thing or the other or both largely depends on where we got our experience. An experience of, if you take a same person and somehow magically multiply that person, duplicate, put one in Google and put another one in a more traditional company, we are likely going to get very different people after 10 years.
Yes. I can totally see that. And the way you said it is absolutely, I couldn't have said it better. You're absolutely right. I think your environment influences who you end up becoming and how you think about technology and implementations and engineering, that how you cultivate yourself, what kinds of habits you develop is definitely a factor of your how you're seasoned is definitely a factor of the environment that you grew up in. I think it's that intentionality, Victor, right? I mean, it's about where you find yourself in that first job is, I think it's an important first step. There's a little bit of luck, but there's also a little bit of awareness factor, and you've got to be good. Not everybody can make it into a Google.
No, absolutely. Of course. I mean, it's definitely not only that the company makes 100% of us, but see, important percentage, right, is environment shaping us, right? Whatever that environment is.
Yeah, absolutely.
It kind of, there is, I see a very clear pattern that can be recognized in what companies are looking for, right? Which you can express in different ways. Maybe you can express it through price, for example, right? Some companies are looking for a specific person that has a specific skill set and is willing to pay for that skill set, maybe double or even triple of what an average engineer costs. And then we have companies who are somehow think that quantity is going to bring quality. If we put 100 people on this problem, even if they just graduated yesterday, it's somehow going to get solved.
Yeah. I don't think that'll get them very far. I've seen a few people that think that way. You're very right. It's in technology, quality matters. Quality of the individual is so important. My personal observation is when you have a really good engineer, the productivity and the outcome, it's not 2 or 3 times, it's 10 times higher. I mean, it's orders of magnitude different. And in that case, what you pay that person is a lot less important than ensuring that that person is put on the right task. And it's actually you do what it takes to retain that person.
We've had people ask us this question before. I'm going to pose it to you. Usually these are people straight out of college, or they're just trying to find their first job. And they're asking, okay, I have to have X amount of experience, but I can't get anybody to give me the experience. What would you say to people like that?
I don't think anybody needs to give you experience. I think, it's again, I think, Darren, it's that intentionality. It's about whether you're willing to do what it takes or you're just waiting for somebody and then hoping for the best. Today, you think about the largest, most impactful companies in the world. They were all created by kids in their dorm rooms at some point, right? Think about Facebook, Google, Microsoft, Apple. All these were created by college kids. Today, they are the most prolific people in the world. I've personally found really young people getting fresh out of college outperform their seniors with 10 years of experience just because of how they have applied themselves. I currently have people in my organization, interns, that are so good. And I struggle because I don't want to offend somebody that has 10, 12 years of experience that's not producing as much and as the kind of quality that this little kid does, right? So I think, experience is important, but it can be acquired no matter where you sit because of the innovation economy we're in today.
So here's a question about 10 years of experience of that hypothetical person, right? Is that 10 years of experience or is that 10 times 1 year of repeated experience?
Yeah, I think it's about when that person came onto this planet and how long he has lived. It's not about 10 years of experience. It's just about, you're absolutely right. I don't know. It's probably, you could look at it any which way, right? They have to get up and they just repeat the same thing over and over. There's no growth. There's no learning. They're just basically doing the job given to them. They're punching in code. Even that may be mediocre. Whereas this other guy that comes in is constantly growing. He's constantly learning. He knows, he's got the awareness. And I think, Darren, back to that question that you're asking about the skills, maybe the two skills, so obviously there's the hard skills, the technical skills, and the soft skills, which we're all talking about: communication, understanding other people, empathy, all that good stuff. But I think the two skills that I've really found as being essential for producing good quality stuff are, number one, being highly organized and in taking the right approach, whether it's technology or whether it is product development, where technology is a part of that product development. And more importantly, the awareness. Where is the world going? What's out there? And being able to then research the various things that are out there and then being able to pick and choose and learn it quickly. These younger people that I'm seeing in colleges, maybe because of the kinds of friendships they develop and the kind of the circles they decide and choose to move in, they have that. Whereas this 10-year experience, or a guy that was born 10 years earlier, he's just doing his job, going home, getting a paycheck, and he's happy, self-satisfied. And at the end of 10 years, is probably less valuable than he was 10 years back.
Well, wouldn't it be semi-true that interns, when they come in, they're working usually on very tightly scoped work, whether that's a single project or a handful of projects? As you're saying, the person that's got 10 years in front of them, going home, if they've got a family already, they've got family things. Usually interns don't have that kind of overhead, if you will. Is that one of the reasons why interns tend to outperform the employees?
Absolutely. I think there is, they don't have a lot of baggage. They're coming in, they have an erectness to their carriage. They have just nothing but aspiration and hope for what they could be doing. They don't have the learning that something cannot be done. In fact, what we do, Darren, is we don't put them through a serious training regiment of any sort. Sometimes, obviously, we want to select really good candidates. When we select them, and we're not putting them through a training regiment, because in some ways it binds them to a specific way of doing things. Instead, I found a lot of success in letting him explore that, young boy or girl, just explore and find a way, an approach himself or herself to get that outcome. The longer they stay in a certain role that is predefined, the more limitations do they impose on their own minds, is probably what it is. At some level, you want these people to continue to innovate and continue to learn and not know of any limits that exist.
Whereas the tenure person basically has had all hope beaten out of him because of politics and everything else, and the intern hasn't learned that part of the business yet.
Yeah, I mean, that statement is true, but there's that presumption that there is. Somehow he's subject to the environment and he cannot influence any different. I think a person that really wants to do it. How many people do we see in the same organization with 10 years of experience? One that becomes, a senior part of the senior leadership team. The other one is exactly where that person was 10 years back and is only complaining, disgruntled, right? I place more responsibility on the individual than on the environment. Environment does play a part, but every individual bears the ability and the responsibility to influence the organization or the environment that he or she is a part of. Isn't it true?
I see it more as, defensive mechanism. I see it as a train that goes fast, and every year it goes faster. And the moment you kind of fall out of that train, you don't want to go back, and catch up with the rest of the newbies. Rather, you're going to defend your whatever your skills are, right? I have 20 years of experience in DB2. Who are you to tell me about Mongo? Because if I actually accept Mongo as, and I'm using Mongo as an example, right? As an alternative to DB2, then your experience and my experience are the same. All of a sudden, I'm not a person that is above you. I'm not a person that justifies its big paycheck because I have 20 years of experience that led me to be principal something, right? So it's almost a necessity to defend misplaced promotion, right? And because you are indeed valuable, right? There is a value in many years of experience with DB2. It's just that the moment technology changes, your value disappears. And then you better make sure that that technology does not change.
You're almost holding your company hostage to the technology stack that you're good at that point. And this is, I think, the fundamental difference between people that just focus on tools versus people that focus on constructs and outcomes. If you want to focus on the approach and the outcome you want to accomplish with the approach, the tool then really is only a tool. If you focus on the tools so much that all you have done is dedicated your life to learning that one thing, the moment that becomes obsolete, either you're obsolete or you want to keep your company from adopting what is new, what is latest and greatest.
I think that this goes back to the beginning of our conversation, where I see companies actually being partly to be blamed. Because if I go to that DB2 example, there was a need to make that person indispensable, to make that person an expert. Any single day that person would spend on exploring something that is not necessary at that very moment would be badly seen by a company, hypothetical company, right? So company but nudges us to become very efficient in what we do, and at the same time creates long-term inefficiency, right? That something changes. Doesn't matter whether it's what I just said, I think it's equally valuable to processes. Forget about technology, right? Whomever was managing projects in waterfall fashion for 20 years was rejecting agile when it appeared. Exactly same story, right?
Absolutely.
So I want to go back to the tool thing real quick. Shouldn't a tool just be a tool? This is where I see a lot of people just get hung up on the tools, like I am the best at doing X. How can you help convince people that's not necessarily the best idea for longevity?
If I may say something, I don't think that what you just said is right. The tool is just a tool. It takes time to master something, right? I can quickly learn a new programming language, considering myself decent programmer, right? But it takes time to really master how to write code in specific language that is efficient, right? Things that people at the beginning do not see. It takes years to master Kubernetes, right? Just saying, hey, I'm going to create a cluster of 50 nodes is not good enough. We need to master those. So it's not that tool is just a tool. It is just a tool, but it requires certain level of proficiency that is obtained only with certain amount of practice. Just like, hey, Formula One is just a car. I can go there and then go fast as hell, right? It's not that easy.
I think it's important to innovate and continuously upgrade our skills. If you just extrapolate what you're saying to what happened with, let's say, BlackBerry, it was a fantastic phone, and we couldn't think of anything else but that. Everybody wanted the BlackBerry, and then in comes Apple, and now where is BlackBerry? It's gone. I think I look at tools and excessive dependence on a single tool to frame one's career in much the same light. You focus on learning one thing. Let's say Terraform is all I learned. Terraform today is the thing. You can do practically anything you want to do with Terraform, and I've learned a lot of it. It's massive. It takes years of commitment, and I can do a lot with that. Now let's fast forward 10 years from today. We just spoke about how DevOps is not where it's supposed to be. 5 years back, DevOps was just a concept. I had people tell me, you know what, I have my dev guy and my ops guy. I put them in the same room. That's my DevOps, right? And today, in the past 5 years, there's been over a 600% increase in the number of DevOps tools. And now I pick up a few of those tools. Let's say I pick up Terraform because it's the most prolific tool today. 10 years fast forward, we don't know where technology is going to be. And I've dedicated my 10 years. 10 years later, I'm older. I'm using something that probably is no longer being used, or there are better alternatives. And I know nothing but that one tool. What happens to me? I'm going to find myself irrelevant. So to Darren's point, I believe it's important that people look at tool as an important aspect of bringing efficiency to the outcome I want to accomplish. But I go back, Victor, to always thinking about training people and people cultivating the habit of looking at approaches. So when somebody comes to me and says in my team that, hey, you know what, I have become an AWS certified architect, I ask him to always go and look at TOGAF, for example. Be more grounded in your architectural approach and see how being an AWS architect maps to that baseline architectural capability. Because today there is AWS, tomorrow there's Azure. Maybe you have to be good at both. Maybe there's something completely different tomorrow. So what is the baseline construct and the baseline knowledge of engineering that ultimately is going to stay relevant? And can you then pick and choose and have the ability to keep learning those various tools and technologies and programming languages that can then be used to apply and realize the approach that you're trying to apply?
Well, yeah, I mean, that definitely. Under no condition, I was trying to say, hey, we should pick Terraform and stick with it for 20 years. But I'm also trying to say is that sometimes people go into the other extreme. To me, the funny title was full stack developer. I think that simply that never worked, simply because
I've seen those pictures, those funny pictures of horse, at the back, and just the kids drawing in the front. explaining how full stack development
Exactly. So kind of
actually works.
there must be a balance between, you shouldn't stay with Terraform for 20 years, but let's kid ourselves. You cannot do something in AWS with Terraform with a single day of experience in both. So kind of there must be certain level of proficiency and also understanding that there comes a time, whether that's a week later or a year later, to let go of that.
Yes, I mean, not lose yourself to a tool, not lose, be able to stay in touch. That's that awareness thing. Back to what I was saying about being aware of what's happening, where is the world going, how far is what I'm using gonna take my company to the next level, and am I an instrument in taking it to the next level?
But here's a question about the next level. How do we get to the next levels with the current speed of emergence of next levels? Right? Kind of like people are still trying to figure out what is what is Docker, and we are already in Kubernetes. We changed 57 different 57 times in the last 5 years, and if
And AWS has its own flavor, and Azure has its
exactly.
own little
And
implementation.
if you look at CNCF landscape, you're probably going to have a stroke before you actually understand what's going on there. So that's another problem, right? Kind of, it's almost impossible to keep up the pace. I'm completely lost.
I I almost think of today's engineers as Hollywood stars or models. Every model has a certain lifespan, which is very short-lived, and then you have other people that replace you because everybody wants that young face, right? Very few people have an evergreen presence. Engineers have become quite like that unless they somehow learn to stay young in their ability to learn and keep up. But I am a firm believer, Victor, in being extremely good and committed to the basics. The basics don't change, they are applicable. And every implementation that we see, a tool that comes up is an implementation of basic construct. So it's important that we are aware of those basic constructs. And I'll tell you something that I learned when I was in school over nearly 2.5 decades back. This is something that my professor would always say. We were learning computer science, and he would say, "Hey, forget about implementation. Tell me what is the story," right? So if you take that to today's cloud ops, and somebody says, "I need to learn this, I need to learn this, I need to learn that," I ask them, "What's the story? Tell me the story." So here's an example of a story, right? So I want to say something like, I want to auto provision using Kubernetes, or let's say I want to auto provision on EC2 servers and automate deploying Dockerized apps using Ansible, taking advantage of some dynamic inventory, all integrated in a single CI/CD pipeline. So I'm now talking of it as a combination of tools that will accomplish a goal rather than being dedicated to just AWS, EC2, or Ansible, as an example. So I'm now talking about the entire life cycle that goes into building something in my DevOps and cloud ops, both provisioning as well as DevOps. And I'm talking about an end state, which is ultimately geared towards the core of why DevOps came into picture, which is reducing the frictions and roadblocks that go into release pipelines, release processes. So if I understand DevOps as it's not about tools, I'm going to quit thinking about DevOps as a term. I'm going to think about DevOps as a concept, the main objective of which is effective release process that enables the development of secure, error-free, dependable systems without technical debt and with efficiency. So now I'm thinking about DevOps as a mechanism to accomplish that outcome for my company. And then I'm going to say, okay, I'm going to accomplish that with this little story. It's a very simple one-liner story, but there's a story. And now I'm going to fill those blanks with specific tools, and I'm going to learn those tools. What are the other tools that can also fill that blank? In what combination? Then I am now thinking like an engineer because I'm trying to accomplish an outcome. If I just think about, hey, there are so many configurable possibilities when I use Ansible, then I'm basically becoming an Ansible toolist rather than an engineer.
So we've sort of come full circle. We went back, you brought up its basics. And the basics, going back to the beginning of our conversation, was persistence, communication, picking up learning tools when you need to. And as you just wrapped up there, it's like, what are the holes that can be filled with different tools? I could use Ansible, I could use Terraform, I could, depending, right? Or if I'm using CI/CD type tools, I could pick from the 90 that are out. Oh, wait, there was another one born just now, 91 that were just born. That's JavaScript. That's what we should be able to do as an engineer. We need to be able to have that, as you said earlier, the ability to learn and keep up. If we don't want to keep that ability alive within us, we don't want to keep learning and we don't want to keep up, then just quit. Go get another job. Go find your space working in retail and greeting somebody at a door. That would be okay. Because then at the end of the day, you just go home. You're not going to be getting an on-call at 3 a.m, usually from there. So Shank, you talked a little bit about BOS Framework up front. Why don't you give us a little bit more detail around that as we're starting to wrap up?
So BOS Framework is a cloud enablement platform. We had this long conversation. The reason we had to have this conversation is because there's so many tools and you could so quickly be lost in the various tools. If you think about cloud ops today, it's not a job. It's an entire portfolio. It's a department. You've got to have so many specialties and subspecialties if you start focusing on all of them properly. So most companies, especially in the mid-market or growth stage startups, they're large enough to experience the problems with security, scaling, availability, compliance, etc. But they're not large enough to be able to build a team and pay those expensive engineers full-time to be in their companies to do all of that. So what we did is build this platform through which companies can provision, maintain, and gain compliance all in one go without having to learn IAC or DevOps. So it's a single platform approach to provisioning, maintenance, and compliance in the cloud in a cloud agnostic manner, and the ability to view everything through a single interface for companies that are in their growth phases and want to build reliable, efficient cloud ops systems.
And still be able to stay secure and compliant without having to think much about it.
That's correct. And just to give you an example, there was a company that we recently worked with. They were spending over $1 million on cloud ops maintenance. They employed BOS. It took us about 4 months to layer everything that they have on BOS in their AWS and Azure accounts. They became multi-cloud. Their total maintenance spend dropped by about 80%. Now they spend less than $200,000.
So that means they can go to Costco or Sam's and load up the refrigerator now for the people that are still left behind. I would imagine in saying that, though, it's sort of joking, but not really, when they were able to reduce that by 80%, did that mean a lot of people got let go?
Their outsourced companies got let go.
Ah, interesting.
Because again, if you think about it, cloud ops, they don't sell cloud ops. Cloud ops is absolutely essential for running their product and their technology, but what they sell is everything but cloud ops. So where does the company spend their time, energy, and money? On that creative product, but not on this backend, is the concept of BOS. So we ensure that we handle that engineering portion, leaving creative portion to their engineers.
So all of Sashank's information is going to be down in the show notes. Sashank, thanks for being with us today.
Enjoyed it, Darren. Victor, thank you.
We hope this episode was helpful to you. If you want to discuss it or ask a question, please reach out to us. Our contact information and a link to the Slack workspace or at devopsparadox.com/contact. If you subscribe through Apple Podcast, be sure to leave us a review there. That helps other people discover this podcast. Go sign up right now at devopsparadox.com to receive an email whenever we drop the latest episode. Thank you for listening to DevOps Paradox.